Nobody anticipated what was discovered at James Mason's Beverly Hills house after his death in 1984. Millions of dollars worth of film reels were concealed behind fake walls. The big shock, however, wasn't that. A cassette recording with the label "Do Not Play" turned up from the same property 10 years later. Mason's unfiltered opinions about Hollywood's most sinister secrets were captured on the 90-minute tape. Studio executives made an attempt to purchase it. Fortunes were given by collectors, but Mason's remarks against his well-known co-stars and the covert crimes of the industry were so shocking that they nearly vanished. James Mason was born in Huddersfield, West Yorkshire, on May 15, 1909. His father operated a prosperous wool firm that sold exquisite cloth all across Europe. Therefore, his family was rooted in the textile industry. His mother hoped James would have a decent future in architecture because she hailed from a cultured Lancaster family. Nevertheless, Mother saw his talent for performing at a young age. To soften his Yorkshire accent, he is quietly setting up elocution lessons. The seed for a life that would always be split between abiding by the rules and disobeying them was sown by that early combination of privilege, expectation, and covert encouragement. James received a scholarship at the age of 14 to attend Marlborough College, one of the best universities in England. However, life wasn't simple there. He suffered from a severe stammer that made him feel alone. When his acting teacher asked him to join the school's little theatrical club, everything changed. He was able to conquer his stammer thanks to the training, and the performance experience stoked his inner fire. Later, he wrote about the exuberance he experienced when reciting Shakespeare's lines. Calling it exhilarating, he gained confidence and a sense of purpose from the stage. His parents intended him to pursue a secure career in architecture, and he did so when he enrolled at Cambridge in 1927. However, he was covertly performing in play after play with the Marlowe Society while he was in school, appearing in everything from contemporary verse drama to Greek tragedies. His father offered him a job in the family business in 1930, which would have ensured him a prosperous future. James declined. Rather, he joined a London repertory theatre, which his father deemed insane. The family was deeply divided as a result of the choice. For James, however, it was the instant he put the stage ahead of everything else. His early acting years were difficult. He occasionally performed in half-empty provincial halls while working with small touring companies. He once pawned his pocket watch to buy food because he was so short on cash. He even slept on chilly marble floors backstage. When playwright J.B. Priestley saw him during an audition and offered him a part in the West End of London, everything changed. He went from a struggling actor to a critical success almost suddenly, commended for his performance's depth. This was the first of many times James would use sheer willpower to pull himself back from the brink. Soon after, his private life attracted almost as much interest as his professional life. He met a married woman on a movie set named Pamela Kino, and he fell in love with her. Both individually and publicly, their connection sparked a scandal. He even shared a roof with Pamela and her husband for a while, a circumstance that astounded everyone who found out. James and Pamela hurried to get married in Nevada after her husband eventually filed for divorce. But the timing sparked a flurry of bigamy suspicions. His reputation was harmed by the secrecy surrounding their union. But in spite of the consequences, their relationship remained strong. His passion occasionally drove him to risky extremes on set. He insisted on doing his own stunts while I Met a Murderer was being filmed. He was severely injured in a cart accident that sent him plummeting off a precipice. He concealed his broken wrist under a coat and continued filming that same day, refusing to receive the necessary medical attention. Throughout his career, he carried the physical reminder of the injury, which never completely healed. James took a decision that divided the population when war broke out. He registered as a conscientious objector after declining military duty. Some studios wouldn't hire him, and newspapers called him a coward. During the Blitz, however, he chose to drive ambulances rather than flee, risking his life night after night to rescue survivors from flaming debris. His service did little to appease his detractors, despite the fact that it was riskier than many combat duties. Nevertheless, The months of unrelenting labor demonstrated a distinct kind of bravery that never quite matched the expectations of the general public. With the release of The Man in Grey in 1943, everything changed. James became a star after persuading the director to let him to portray the antagonist rather than the hero. Audiences flocked to theaters to see him because of his riveting performance, and they cheered when his character ultimately met his end. James Mason became one of the most talked about actors in Britain as a result of the movie, which also smashed box office records. James Mason's 1945 hit song, The Seventh Veil, was more than just a groundbreaking performance. For British film, it was a watershed moment. The movie had been produced on a shoestring, spending less than $100,000. However, by 1948 it had earned almost $2 million globally and over $253,000 in the UK alone. Shocking the industry, Mason's profit-sharing arrangement added even more significance to the tale. According to reports, he was given $20,000, which was a substantial amount at the time and would now be close to $800,000. The movie's success was astounding. It attracted nearly 18 million admissions and even outsold Gone with the Wind in some regions of the United Kingdom. The sad story of a domineering piano instructor and his pianist Ward enthralled audiences. Mason's deep and nuanced persona resonated so strongly that it influenced the development of a new type of charismatic but ethically dubious leading man. The project had just as much turmoil behind the camera. One of the most talked about rivalries in movie history developed between Mason and co-star Ann Todd. Their work-related arguments swiftly escalated into violent altercations that made weekly headlines. Despite their infamous on-set clashes, Mason startled industry insiders by insisting Todd should be given equal billing. He allegedly tore up a script in front of the crew at one angry moment. They were dubbed cement and dynamite by the press, which aptly described their peculiar combination of stability and instability. Ironically, those who saw parallels to that actual struggle in the plot found the suspense to be even more captivating. The tale was further stoked when Todd revealed years later that she and Mason had an affair while shooting. Despite his victory, Mason suffered a terrible defeat. Even though American critics praised The Seventh Veil and Odd Man Out, he was not included in the Academy Awards nominees in 1947. Mason was declared ineligible due to a technical restriction that disqualified movies that were initially released in Britain. It was a horrible irony. For Best Original Writing, the movie took home an Oscar, but nothing was given to its leading man. Mason carried the scar for many years, claiming it was an obvious indication of prejudice against foreigners. He never forgot the pain of that initial rejection at the pinnacle of his career. Even though he went on to receive 3 Oscar nominations, he was also followed off-screen by controversy. He departed Britain for Hollywood in 1947, at a time when the country was grappling with post-war hardship. The explanation was straightforward yet quite unpopular. Mason was in risk of losing nearly all of his income due to Britain's high tax rate. He wouldn't have kept much of his earnings, which were close to $100,000. The people saw his action as self-serving, and newspapers accused him of deserting his nation during its time of need. It was made worse by the fact that American studios were removing British films due to currency limitations at the same time. Mason never entirely recovered his reputation at home, and the timing could not have been worse. Additionally, he had a knack for drawing odd headlines. He acquired a lion cub from a circus charity that was having financial difficulties in 1946. Neighbors were initially thrilled by the animals wandering around his Surrey estate, but the amusement soon subsided when the cub developed into a 200B predator. Its incessant roaring disrupted the tranquility, and one night it escaped during a thunderstorm, frightening the neighbors until it was apprehended hours later with assistance from zoo specialists in London. After the lion interrupted a garden party and terrified guests fled for their lives. Complaints escalated into a full-fledged legal battle. The story followed Mason for years as an illustration of how celebrity can occasionally veer into ridiculousness, even if he was ultimately compelled to move the animal and pay damages. Mason was still able to revive his career in spite of the controversies and failures. After being cast as General Rammel in The Desert Fox, he inked a long-term contract with 20th Century Fox in 1951. The deal helped him regain his reputation in Hollywood and guaranteed him a permanent job. He played Norman Maine, a fading actor whose tragic decline demonstrated Mason's depth and vulnerability as a performer. Opposite Judy Garland in A Star Is Born a few years later, his status as one of the most versatile actors of his era was cemented when the movie became a classic. Mason's role as the sophisticated and threatening Philip Vanham in Alfred Hitchcock's North by Northwest in 1959 put him back in the public eye. His portrayal demonstrated his ability to combine charm and terror on screen, creating one of Hollywood's most iconic antagonists. James Mason made a purchase in 1949 that would alter the course of cinema history as well as his own life. For roughly $82,000, he purchased a magnificent residence in Beverly Hills that had once belonged to Buster Keaton. The property had been built in the 1920s for $300,000. Unwanted in a time when large, historic homes were out of style, the estate had been on the market for years. Mason was first hesitant, since he was aware of the expenses involved in maintaining a 20-room estate with elaborate ceilings and expansive grounds, even though his wife, Pamela, loved the Italian villa. But in the end, he consented, securing one of the most amazing deals in Hollywood history. From Marlene Dietrich to Cary Grant, the house had hosted many well-known visitors. But nobody could have foreseen the mystery it was concealing. During standard renovations a few years later, workers discovered a fake wall in a tiny shed behind the house. When they succeeded, they discovered reels of nitrate film that had been stored for many years. Everyone was astounded by what they discovered. Buster Keaton's lost masterpieces, such as the long-lost The Boat and a full copy of The General, were among the reels. Not just any old prints either. Because they were kept in settings that should have destroyed them long ago, they were among the few copies that still exist today. The workshop, which Cotton had constructed himself, served as a private storage facility for his movies. These treasures may have been lost forever if Mason hadn't found them. Mason was aware of the risk involved with neglecting the nitrate reels. They were already degrading and extremely combustible. He immediately contacted Raymond Rohauer, a preservationist. The films were difficult and expensive to preserve. Mason paid $5,000 to have them replicated onto safer film stock, which was a significant sum in the early 1950s. Instead of hiding them or possibly destroying them, he gave the originals to the Library of Congress. Mason's choice saved some of the best silent comedy films for future generations at a time when many studios were throwing away old reels. But it wasn't all that easy. Mason was challenged by Caton's widow, who said the movies should have gone via the estate because they were her late husband's personal belongings. Mason made a private agreement to avoid the court's battle, which may have continued for years. In return for her giving away any future claims, he offered her 2 reels. In addition to saving him many litigation fees, this amicable agreement made sure the movies wouldn't vanish into closed disputes. In a rare instance, common sense won out and Caton's brilliance was shared by everyone. The effects were both immediate and long-lasting. Using the films Mason had saved, a significant retrospective of Caton's work was held at the Museum of Modern Art in 1957. The event contributed to the current campaign to preserve and research ancient movies. And critics and viewers were reminded of the genius of silent humor. Previously regarded as disposable amusement, this was now seen as art. Movie makers took inspiration from the unearthed works, and academics started closely studying Caton's technique. Mason's discovery demonstrated that it was still possible to retrieve lost films, which fueled subsequent searches that ultimately saved thousands more. Outside of this amazing finding, however, Mason's life was anything but tranquil. His once passionate marriage to Pamela descended into a public scandal and a whirlwind of accusations. By the early 1960s, Mason's accusations of adultery and Pamela's accusations of cruelty had escalated into tabloid battles. He lost millions of dollars as a result of their protracted and costly divorce. Intimate elements of their life were revealed in courtrooms that turned into a theater. From acrimonious financial disputes to startling accusations of enmity and jealousy. Both of them were scarred by the consequences even after it ended, with Mason subsequently confessing that the marriage had been his worst regret and withdrawing abroad. The ensuing custody dispute only made matters worse. Portland, their 14-year-old daughter, was made to testify about their home life, including ridiculous disputes that frequently revolved on who loved the family dog more. Even the couple's custody of their more than 20 dogs became a source of conflict. Months passed during the drawn-out court proceedings, and Mason briefly escaped to Europe with the kids before being compelled to return. The public was appalled by reports of broken vases, flying debris, and hurt dogs, which depicted a chaotic home. The children were ultimately given joint custody. However, the harm had already been done. While Morgan battled addiction and frequently blamed those years for his problems, Portland grew up ready to leave Hollywood behind. Mason's personal struggles also included his own harmful addictions, as if that weren't enough. Between the late 1950s and the early 1960s, he lost around $750,000 at Monte Carlo casinos as a result of his addiction to high-stakes gambling. He even pawned his Golden Globe medal to pay off bills at the height of his addiction, only to buy it back days later at a far higher price. Despite friends like Alfred Hitchcock's entreaties to stop, he gambled millions in baccarat, often playing for days on end. His addiction almost destroyed him emotionally and financially, leaving a trail of debt, houses sold, and rumors of suicide attempts. Nevertheless, despite his struggles, Mason directed his devotion into animal rights, an unexpected cause. He contributed an incredible $100,000 in 1968 to support the establishment of the World Society for the Protection of Animals American chapter. Years before, he had seen a vicious dogfight during a movie shoot, which sparked his sympathy. He took care of dozens of animals on his estates, saved strays, and vigorously opposed animal abuse in circuses and laboratories. He provided funding for clinics, testified before Congress, and even adopted elephants to protect them from exploitation. He was one of the first celebrities to devote their name and wealth to animal welfare, and his commitment predated the trend of celebrity activism. Mason's private writings, which were made public after his passing, showed yet another side of him that was characterized by hopelessness and insecurity. He talked about times when he thought about taking his own life because he was lonely, had debts, and had failed in his career. He acknowledged using sleeping pills excessively, feeling completely invisible as roles started to fade away, and being crippled by peer jealousy. Fans were taken aback by these diaries, which revealed a guy whose outward elegance and charm concealed serious battles with addiction and melancholy. Although James Mason was renowned for his grace on film, his late career decisions demonstrated the extent to which he was prepared to sacrifice himself for his art. Mason agreed to take a $100,000 pay cut when Stanley Kubrick gave him the part of H. Bert in Lolita in 1962 so that the movie could proceed under the careful observation of stringent American censors. For a celebrity of his caliber, it was a shocking sacrifice, but Kubrick had little wiggle room due to the contentious issues of the book. Kubrick moved the movie toward psychological tension rather than explicit content, producing a plot that was suggestive but restrained. Nevertheless, following its June 1962 premiere, the movie was banned in a number of nations. In order to comprehend the extent of H. Bert's obsession, Mason read Nabokov's book 15 times and met with psychologists. In order to hone delicate facial expressions and gestures that might convey desire without going against the rules on set, he also set up private sessions with Sue Lyon, the 14-year-old cast member playing Lolita. Although Mason's attitude was extremely professional, Lyon later noted that it made her uneasy. Rumor had it that producer James B. Harris had a covert relationship with Lyon after filming was finished, and there were rumors of impropriety involving him behind the scenes. Mason brought his typical intensity to the set. Peter Sears, who portrayed the eccentric Claire Quilty, collaborated closely with him. inventing lines as Kubrick employed many cameras to capture the erratic energy. As a result, Kubrick's technique veered more toward the weird, while Mason's acting grounded the movie by shocking viewers by giving a horrific figure a surprisingly human quality. Mason's perseverance was demonstrated by the fact that one sequence of H-Bert's breakdown was reshot a dozen times to achieve the ideal ratio of hopelessness to restraint. Critics commended Mason for a performance that lasted long after the credits rolled. Despite the movie's meager box office earnings, reactions to the part were intense. His reputation for taking chances that few prominent men would have dared was solidified by the hundreds of messages accusing him of praising deviance. Mason pushed the envelope once more in Georgie Girl, 1966, a few years later. Mason's portrayal of James Lamington, an older man who is pursuing a much younger woman, was the most memorable part of the movie. The role hardly took up 7 pages of the book. He included purposeful pauses, extended silences, and spontaneous comments that made the audience cringe. Mason's decisions only added to the unease of the British censors, who had already referred to the script as one of the most unethical they had ever read. The plot was both eerie and engrossing because of his relationship with Lynn Redgrave, who portrayed the innocent Georgie. Mason demonstrated his dedication to parts he believed in by agreeing to reduce his price once more. He was nominated for an Oscar, received a Golden Globe, and was praised by critics for his ability to transform a silent moment into something more impactful than speech. Mason demonstrated the same commitment off-screen. He did the voice of Captain Nemo for the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea ride at Disneyland in 1959. He insisted on filming at 3 in the morning inside a small fictitious submarine in order to convey the sensation of being stranded beneath the ocean. To make his voice more genuine, he even tried on a diving suit off the coast of California. His remarks reverberated through the undersea voyage for years, and park visitors were unaware that they were coming from Mason. Later, when Paul Newman's career was in decline, Mason utilized his power to land the lead part in The Verdict, 1982. Mason served as a mentor both on and off-screen, often spending late nights playing chess and talking strategy in Newman's trailer. In addition to enabling Newman provide one of his best performances to date, his portrayal of a crafty defense lawyer garnered him another Oscar nomination. His legacy has extended to television. Millions of people watched his 1972 narration for the BBC miniseries, The Search for the Nile, demonstrating that huge actors could add seriousness to television. Critics praised Mason's voice for giving history a sense of urgency and life, and the series earned both an Emmy and a Peabody. Mason's last performance was captured on camera during the 1984 shooting party. On the eve of World War I, he filled in for an injured actor and gave a stirring performance as a man holding on to dwindling customs. Mason passed away from a heart attack a few months later at the age of 75. He was posthumously awarded Actor of the Year by the London Critics Circle after the film's release the following year. James Mason made decisions throughout his career that frequently astounded viewers and reviewers. Whether it was reducing his pay, accepting awkward jobs, or unexpectedly redefining himself. A startling tale regarding James Mason's legacy surfaced in 1985. Mason and his wife Pamela had purchased a stately home that had belonged to Buster Keaton back in 1952. The 10,000-square-foot Italian-style home was surrounded by 42 palm trees and has unique amenities including a mosaic-tiled Roman-style pool and a mechanical trout stream. At the time, Mason was unaware that a film vault concealed within the estate held some of Catane's long-lost 2 genuine comedies from the 1920s. Classics including Cops, The Boat, The Playhouse, and The Balloon Attic were printed within. All are believed to have vanished following Keaton's financial and professional breakdown in the 1930s. Reels worth more than Mason had spent for the entire property were discovered when he drilled open the vault. The discovery gave Keaton's fame a much-needed boost, and these films were later repaired and archived. This story reappeared after Mason's death in 1984, shocking the business. Records never supported rumors that Chaplin letters commended Mason's efforts, but the fact was sufficient in and of itself. Mason and Chaplin both made contributions to silent film, and their ashes were interred in Switzerland beside Chaplin's mausoleum. In the years following Mason's passing, rumors of his missing voice also surfaced. Mason criticized Hollywood's hypocrisy after some reported that a 90-minute cassette with the label "Do Not Play" had been discovered in 1994. Mason's actual words were preserved in interviews and publications that told a similar scenario, but no such tape has ever been confirmed. Speaking about his part in Lolita in an interview from 1981, he clarified that the movie was a love tale influenced by the restrictions Hollywood studios placed on contentious subjects rather than a scandalous work of exploitation, as some had assumed. He publicly discussed how big studios frequently banned movies while still making money off of their popularity. He had seen this double standard for decades. Mason's 1985 posthumous autobiography Before Unforget detailed how he had almost lost his American career by playing in politically sensitive films in the 1940s, and how he frequently declined opportunities when studios attempted to cage him in. He also talked about the brutality he saw toward celebrities like Judy Garland, mentioning how Warner Brothers abandoned her after filming A Star and drove her to the limit. Audio recordings of Mason discussing these topics, which have been saved in archives and occasionally auctioned off, have preserved his viewpoint and served as a reminder to subsequent generations that he had never shied away from criticizing the shortcomings of the industry. Scholars also started to view Mason's career differently. Numerous studies have highlighted his true versatility across a career that comprised over 150 films. Even though certain official rating claims cannot be confirmed, he transitioned across genres with ease. From gripping dramas like Hitchcock's North by Northwest, which was a box office hit in Britain in the 1940s, to thrillers like The Seventh Veil, and even epic adventures like Journey to the Center of the Earth. Critics noted that he had a unique ability that maintained him in demand for decades, the ability to effortlessly go from a sweet romantic lead to a terrifying villain. Despite never having received an Academy Award, his nuance and emotional depth in roles in movies like Lolita and A Star Is Born were studied. According to recent evaluations, his popularity will only increase as more of his work is seen and saved, particularly thanks to contemporary technology that makes older movies more widely available.